and welcome back to another episode of Time to Calibrate. I am joined as ever by my co-hosts Bob Allaby and Marc Levesque. We also have a very special guest here with us this morning, whom I'll introduce in a moment. But before I do, I must welcome Marc back after his recent trip to Greece. How's it going, Marc? How was the trip?
Oh, trip was fantastic. Yeah, apart from the driving in Greece, everything else is amazing. The food, the people, the beaches, the way of life. It's just a great place to be. But it's always good to be home.
That's awesome. I trusted you would have a good time, and I suspect that we'll actually get a full debrief in a future episode that we've actually planned around the idea of travel watches. But I think you might also have an NWA to announce to us, but I'll let that sit for a few minutes.
No problem.
Well, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. As our listeners can see from the show title and the fact that we have been hyping this since our very first episode, today we have with us, finally, Jason Hutton, founding organizer of the Toronto Timepiece Show. Now, Jason grew up in Vancouver, but now calls Ontario his home. He lives and works just north of Toronto. In 2019, Jason launched ZENEA Watches, beginning the design process for their first timepiece, the Eula Diver, which launched in late 2020. ZENEA Watches are designed in Canada and built in Switzerland. And as if that weren't enough, in the spring of 2023, Jason entered into the planning stages for the first ever Toronto Timepiece Show. A little more than a year later, here we are, 2 weeks away from the fruition of all that planning, all that hard work. The Toronto Timepiece Show will take place September 27th to the 29th at the Courtyard Marriott in downtown Toronto. It will occupy 5,500 square feet of exhibition space, more than 60 watch-related brands, and representing 17 countries from around the world. Jason, it appears that you are the little engine that could. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and such a pleasure to be here. I've been tremendously enjoying your folks' podcast since you started, and I think there's great things in store for you, and thank you so much for the kind words. And yeah, only 2 weeks away now. My schedule's very, very busy, as you can imagine, but so excited for the community here and the show and just everything that's happening. So really looking forward to our dialogue today.
Well, we appreciate all your support here on the show, and we appreciate everything you're doing for the Canadian watch scene. So before we sort of cut loose with all of our questions, I actually have a little story to tell, and I hope you don't mind, Jason. You may even know where I'm going with this, but in the early summer of 2023, the two of us had lunch together with Tyler Frederick, the marketing manager for the Calibrated Wrist. It was just around the corner from the Breitling Boutique on Bloor Street at the Bishop in Belcher. And it was there that you first divulged your plans to host the Toronto Timepiece Show. You spoke super excitedly about it. You had all the drafts and the framework for a media kit for potential brands. And then you told us that you had just put a down payment on the Courtyard Marriott facilities using your own money. We were in awe. And then we asked you the most important question. So how many brands have you got on board? And I will never forget your answer. 2, you said. Now, forgive me if I tell you that at that moment, we might have thought you were a little crazy, but your story is the perfect illustration of if you build it, they will come. You are Ray Kinsella, and this is your field of dreams. So let me take this moment to congratulate you and to say sorry for ever thinking that you were crazy.
That's okay. I am kind of crazy, so I don't think your judgment there was incorrect. But yeah, when I remember the day I put that deposit down, though, for the show, and again, it was a passion. It was something I really wanted to create. I had gone through, including our meeting together, and really garnered some of the support of the local community. But I wasn't kidding myself. I knew there was a long road ahead to really make the show happen. And at that point, we had only had a couple of smaller brands had signed up. Lock & King from Hamilton, great guy, Ryan. He's going to be at the show. Very first early supporter of the show, as well as Circular Watches from Germany had wanted to sign on board. And since then, it's been a tremendous amount of work, but we're up to nearly 60 brands now. And we've issued thousands of tickets for the show. We're sold out both for exhibit space and for the tickets. The show has proven to be incredibly popular. And we've got such an amazing brand roster now. And it's not just been my hard work, but, that of the community as well, being very supportive of the show and really, creating those referrals and asking people to come And the community here is so strong. I'm just really excited to be able to bring the full show to the Toronto area in a couple of weeks. And everyone is really, really excited.
Yeah, we are absolutely chomping at the bit here. So we like to begin each show with a wrist check. And Jason, since you're the guest of honor, why don't you kick things off? What do you got on wrist today?
Yeah, I was chatting with Bob about this earlier, and because of my own brand, I'm usually wearing ZENEA 90% of the time, but I decided to change it up today, and I'm wearing on my wrist my Zenith El Primero skeletonized titanium watch. So very happy with this watch. It's a fairly recent pickup within the last year, and I'm just really enjoying it. So that's what I've got on the wrist today.
That's an absolute killer of a piece.
For me, I'm wearing one of the brands that will be attending the show. This is Bob here. I'm actually, I have the pleasure of sitting next to Jason right now today. He's in the studio / my basement this morning. But I had to wear one of the brands attending, and the watch I have on today is the Christopher Ward, one of the new Trident GMTs.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous as well.
Beautiful watch, and by the time this episode comes out, I'll actually have a video on this watch up on the channel. That's coming out here in the next day or two.
Well, I'm really looking forward to that. Marc, what have you got on wrist this morning?
Well, since getting back from Greece, you mentioned New Watch Alert. I picked up a Hamilton khaki navy scuba, from name probably keeps on going, but I picked up that watch during that time, and I've worn it consistently since. And this morning, I was looking at my watch box and saw my Grand Seiko there, having wound down since I got back, and I figured, why not? Let's put this on. And boy, is there ever a difference between the Grand Seiko and the Hamilton, and not just in the size, but in just the way it feels on the wrist. That said, getting the date corrected from the 5th to the 13th on a Traveler's GMT is a bit of a pain in the ass. But anyways, still got it done, and that's what I'm wearing right now, and I'm loving it. So it's the Grand Seiko SPGE 257.
Fantastic, Marc. I really enjoyed seeing the pictures from Greece, and I'm really glad also that you did decide to take that watch with you. What a fantastic piece.
Yeah, it was great having it there too. And again, getting there. Now, what isn't a pain in the ass is changing the time zone when you get to 7 hours ahead. That was fun. Did it on the airplane right before I landed. It was a cinch.
Perfect. Well, this morning, in honor of our guest, I have the Eula Diver on, actually, the time and space from ZENEA. It features a dial from the Munyan Alusta meteorite, which struck the Earth north of the Arctic Circle like 1 million years ago. So, Jason, beautiful watch. Thank you for this.
Thank you so much. That's definitely one of my favorites, and that's usually what's gracing my wrist. And out of the current line, I would say that timepieces are most popular by far. So, and it's interesting actually because the meteorite material actually carbon dates to over 4.5 billion years old. So I always jokingly say that's the best vintage timepiece you could possibly have.
Well, you know, Jason, there are a number of watch enthusiasts in Canada, and these days there are even a good number of independent watch producers, but not all of them decide to organize a multinational timepiece show. So when did you first start to think about this idea, and what made you finally act on it?
I probably started thinking about it, I would say, in fairly early 2023, around like February or March. And I attended a show down in the US under the context of ZENEA. And I think that was the kind of tipping point for me where I thought, you know, this show that you saw a lot of the excitement of the watch community, and the Toronto area in Canada in general has such a large and active community. And I started thinking, you know, I don't understand why somebody hasn't done a show in Toronto. And that's when I started to look at it. When I got home, I started, you know, around early April, phoning venues, doing tours. I knew the type of facility, the size that I wanted. I've been involved with a lot of event planning in the past in my career, my former jobs. So I understood kind of what works well from a flow standpoint and exhibitors. So I looked through about maybe 20 venues. And when I found the Courtyard Marriott, it was the perfect balance between size of venue that I wanted, as well as the type of layouts, and also what was, you know, it's not inexpensive to rent these venues. And this one was kind of the perfect balance point between expenses and the size. And I really felt confident that I could put together a good show. So when I put that deposit down, that's when it became a very, very real. And the efforts on my end just really amped up, and I was working, every morning, every night on this, and it took a lot. It's like moving a freight train. You spend an inordinate amount of energy to kind of get things going, but once it gets going, a lot of people get behind it, and and now we're here about a year and a quarter later. So it's really been an amazing journey for me.
So there's now been trains mentioned twice, the little engine that could, and how it's turned into a train. I've actually known Jason since 2017 when ZENEA was a concept, and he was going through design ideas and prototyping, and there was a lot of challenges it was a real eye opener to me, actually, to see kind of what it takes to put together a brand. Everything from the watch to the packaging and just the whole thing. And I'm just wondering if there's similar challenges when it comes to the show, as far as getting the show going, or is it a completely different animal?
It's a great question. I think there are some similarities. The similarities I would certainly say is when you're creating something new or you're starting really from scratch, you're needing to build a brand and put things together in place to make things happen. That aspect is the same. For this one, in terms of the show, I think some of the difference is because you're dealing not only with a brand, at least my focus tended to be a lot on the actual watch itself and the production and the development of it. There's a design process, of course, with the show to make sure it's working appropriately, but you're navigating through, 50 or 60 different brands who you're partnering with to have a successful show. And they all come to the table. They all have slightly different needs. They all want slightly different things out of the show. Some of them are very familiar with the Canadian market. Other ones are not familiar at all. So there's a lot of additional demands, I would say, that come from, the people that you're working with. And I'm happy to do that. I love connecting people. One of the things that actually that's been a little surprising for me is because we've issued thousands of tickets, and the tickets are now closed, but there's huge demand for tickets still. I'm receiving probably 20 plus messages a day with people asking me if it's any way possible that they can get tickets for the show because, they've just heard about it or they didn't secure the tickets in time and they're wanting to come. So unfortunately, we're really sold out at this point. We're expecting very large crowds, but there's multiple levels that you have to manage doing a show, but I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. And I love, as I'm a watch enthusiast first and foremost, and I love being able to connect with these brands and also other attendees and share that passion. So that's very fulfilling for me.
That's amazing. This is the kind of problem I think every event organizer would like to run into, frankly. Now, Marc, you've been an event organizer and you've been bringing watch people together for years. What do you have to ask Jason?
Yeah, Jason and I go back a while as well. Probably not since 2017, but soon after ZENEA came on board here online, he and I talked about the brand, and I think I helped promote the traveling watch that was going around for a while. That made its way through Canada and had a special Canadian flag that a lot of people signed, including RJ Kama on Super Doctor on Instagram. And in 2021, I had the idea of starting something that I called the Canadian Watch Guild. And I was trying to promote Canadian watchmaking to Canadians and hopefully, get the word out around the world. And I created an Instagram page, and we had quite a few brands that were participating. Faro, Cobra, Canister, Arcus, Wilkes Watchworks, Novo, Lock & King, Heron, Mullinger, Van Banner, York and Front, and of course, ZENEA. And at the time, I was also speaking to Mitchell Wine from Marathon, who was interested, but obviously, being a giant brand compared to the others, we needed to see where this is going before we actually got the whole thing started. And unfortunately, that kind of fell through because after months of working and planning and promoting and creating a forum for the brands to discuss and plan, unfortunately, it kind of fizzled out. Now, at the time, Jason and I were talking quite a bit, and my goal was to create something like the British Alliance where brands will help each other with planning, sourcing, promoting, and so forth. But unfortunately, it wasn't seen as, rising tide lifts all ships. It was more seen as competitors helping competitors, which was unfortunate. But the idea also was eventually to build shows where we'd have a traveling show in Canada with the Canadian brands and hopefully invite other outside brands to come on. I'm so thrilled to see that Jason has put this together. I've been pining for something like this for years. Having been around at the beginning of Time Zone and those times, those forums, we did try getting together and having small groups, what Red Bar does now, but back then, and it was very difficult. We'd be 5 or 4 people, or I think the first thing we ever did was just 3 of us. But this is thrilling. I can't wait. I'm dying to go and see all these people. My only fear is the crowds. You mentioned crowds. I know that at the Worn and Wound windups, oftentimes you'll see lineups just to talk to the person behind the counter or even get to see the watches. I'm really hoping that it disperses, or there's some kind of even flow where people are coming and going. There's time and space to speak to people and get to know people. But Dave, kudos, well done. I'm really excited.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I think crowd management is probably going to be one of our largest challenges, certainly in the show. I've got a large team that's helping me during the weekend, close to a dozen people. So we'll be keeping an eye, as well as the hotel venue where the whole show is being hosted. It's going to be crowded for sure, but we're going to keep a very close eye because there's always this fine balance between keeping good traffic at the show and still having it reasonably spacious enough so people could still move around and you're not shoulder to shoulder. So that's going to be I would say a significant component of my weekend during the show is just managing those crowds and doing our best to get everybody through. There's a lot of variables for the show that make it a challenge from an organization standpoint, one of which is just, how many people are actually going to show up who have the tickets. The tickets are complimentary this year, but also to how long people will stay. We're estimating most people who come in will stay 3 to 4 hours. I do know some other people, though, they go to these watch shows, different geographies, and they stay all day. So that'll be a significant impactor, I would say, is to how quickly people get in and how quickly the show's crowds kind of dissipate or what the flow through is. So many, many variables. And, good news is we've got a great team to help manage that throughout the weekend. And but it will be the first show. So the good news, and like Brent said, it's this is a good challenge to have. So I always anticipated we would have large crowds. I didn't anticipate, though, that we would sell out as quickly as we have. I actually did a site tour down at the hotel yesterday to finalize some details. And in addition to the messages coming to me, there's actually been a ton of people calling the hotel, asking them if they can get them into the show and wanting to join in. So I think people are pulling out all stops, really trying to find ways to get into the show. So the good news is we've got a larger venue for next year as well. So I think we're going to be able to handle significantly larger crowds, but more details on that to follow. But this year, our focus is, of course, to make the show as successful as possible for everyone who attends and also exhibits.
This is just incredible, Jason. Since we're talking about things like crowd control, obviously planning a show of this scale involves a lot more than simply sending out invitations to brands. Can you explain some of the groundwork that goes on behind the scenes to pull this off?
That's probably a whole other podcast episode, but I'll give you the short version of it. When I first started, I obviously had some contacts within the brand community, let's say, but for the most part, when I was reaching out to the brands, they did not know who I was. The show did not have a established reputation because it had never been done before. There had never been a similar show done in Canada before. So we were really starting off from ground zero to a certain extent. A big portion of that, at least how I helped to make the show a success, I was reaching out to people, a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls. I leaned in heavily to the watch community with those relationships that I had. And some of them had good relationships with brands. And, they may not have known me, but they knew my contact very well. And once the contact was on board saying, yeah, I believe in what Jason is doing and what we're doing for the Toronto Timepiece Show, they would be kind enough often to give me that warm introduction. And quite often that opened up the door for dialogue. And then, it's just an exploration of explaining the vision about what we're doing, who's on board, what the vision for the show is, and what's involved with getting on board. So it's been a long process. Some brands were very quick to sign on board. They're like, this looks great. We've never done anything in Canada before. We're super excited. A good example of that is Christopher Ward. I dug up Mike Francis' email from an old forum post from years ago. I sent him a very, what I thought was a very nice message, and I've been a fan of the brand for a long time. And he responded back to me very quickly, and that happened very quickly, actually. And that gave a lot of credibility to the show because Christopher Ward is very well known. Other folks, I talked to them and, they didn't come on board till 8 or 9 months later when the show was almost sold out. So everybody's a little different, but it's a lot of legwork, a lot of follow-up. I've never counted the actual number of emails, but I bet you it's 6,000 or 7,000 at least in terms of the back and forth and dialogues that I've done over the last 14 months. So it's a lot of work.
So there's a couple of things, but one of the things that I'm kind of the most excited about is meeting up with the watch fam. You guys, Brent and I have met a couple of times. I've never met Marc in person, so I'm really looking forward to that. Connecting with some of the brands that I've worked with where I've never actually met the owners. And that's kind of the most exciting thing for me. And I'm wondering if there's a certain thing for you that is like that thing you're looking forward to.
That's certainly one of them. I went to Geneva for the first time ever for Watches and Wonders and several other things that were going on there in April. I know Brent was out there as well, so I got the opportunity to meet him a few times during the course of the week. One of the things I loved about being in Geneva during that week with Watches and Wonders was just the camaraderie and getting the opportunity to meet people face to face and just having things happen. The Toronto show, the premise of it has always been not only to bring the brands into Toronto and have the show, but make the actual show atmosphere feel very welcoming for all levels of attendees. We all have different interests within the watch community, and I really wanted to create a show that was just very welcoming. Part of that is inviting industry people and other collectors and even other brands, even brands who are not participating in the show as an exhibitor this year. I've welcomed them to come and say, you know what, come attend the show, come to the industry, the creators night on the Friday, network, chat with people. And we have a lot of brands actually coming out who are not exhibiting this year, but will be present in the Toronto area during those few days and just networking and chatting and meeting people. And they also want to meet, people who are known within the watch community. Like Bob is a great example. When I first started promoting the show, and there was a few brands that signed up, they knew Bob and they were like, I can't wait to meet Bob. Is he going to be there? And this is true. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So, that connection, I think, is what makes this community really special. And there are so many events going on outside of the show where brands are having special nights, or there's a red bar night, and I know some other brands are doing different activities. I'm very supportive of that and very encouraging of that because I think it just makes for a much better experience overall. And that's something that I want to do with the Toronto and the Vancouver shows over the next, couple of years, is really help build that out. So people will want to come to Toronto, they'll want to come to Vancouver as much for the show as for the networking and those opportunities that presents for everybody being there. And I think that's what really makes the watch weekend or the watch week very special.
I just have a quick little follow-up to that, because this weekend is starting to take a life of its own. There's a lot of little side events like you'd mentioned, and actually there's one in particular on the Friday night that Brent is hosting with RZE. Are you going to be able to have any time to get out to some of these little side shows, so to speak?
I looked it into my calendar. It's fairly busy though, and as you can imagine, I'll be very, very busy during the show. I think it's important to certainly make an appearance. I want to go and have a beverage and enjoy that too, because I enjoy that as a watch enthusiast. So I am going to do my best to get out there and connect with the brands and the outside events as well. So I will be there, but it's because I'm being pulled in about 18 different directions. I'll probably be popping by for 20 minutes or half an hour and then discreetly disappearing from the event and off to the next one. So, but I am looking forward to that a lot.
So, you mentioned Christopher Bode before, which is an amazing get for this event. And Mike Francis and Mike Pearson are just great people to have around, and to have their support is just a blessing. You also have Oris, which is a really nice big company that's going to be present at the show. Are there any brands that you really wanted and weren't able to get, and that now they're looking at next year?
There's many. I'm a big fan of so many different brands. I mean, there's probably too many to mention. I know there's a few, and I know, Marc, you have one of their watches with Formex. I remember I was chatting with them for a long time, and they're very supportive of the community. I anticipate they will be involved in future shows. I know Ken from Arkin Watches is actually, I just got a message this morning that he's planning on coming out just to attend the show. So, that's a brand I would love to have come out. Some of the larger brands, I think, add a different dynamic to the show. So, things like Citizen Group or whatnot, or maybe elements of the Swatch Group. It'll be great to have them involved in future episodes or future iterations of the show. We do have another brand announcement actually, and it's not even on the website yet. So I'm gonna announce it right now live. If that's okay with you guys. So, so one of our retailers, Gem Bijou, which is a great watch shop here in the downtown Toronto area. They've been working very closely with Mito Watches, so they're actually going to be attending the show as well. So this is a pretty big announcement, but we're literally full to capacity now, so there's nobody else coming. This will be the last announcement. So, but yeah, it's an absolutely amazing group of brands which are here, and I've gotten so many, at least verbal commitments or commitments via email for next year from all over the world for brands that want to be joining next year with Toronto. So stay tuned. I think this year is going to be great. I think next year is going to be even more spectacular in so many levels.
Yeah, you mentioned Formex there. I did speak to them about this show in Toronto, and they seem to be quite excited about the Vancouver opportunity this spring. So I think that might be a shoe-in for them.
Yeah, hopefully. And there's so many great brands, like Norcane is another example, had lots of dialogue. And sometimes it's very interesting because when you speak with the different brands, of course, there's a real range from larger companies to much smaller individual, small independent brands or micro brands. And, some of the smaller brands, it's pretty easy for them to make a decision if they have the funds and they'll come to the show. Other brands, which are a little larger, especially some of the European brands, if they're Switzerland or German based, they require a lot longer from a planning standpoint. So it's, the process of planning is much longer for some of these brands, and they need that year and a half lead time to really allocate their funds and plan and put everything together. Other folks are literally like, oh, this sounds awesome. Yeah. Can I send you a deposit? And, a week later they're booked. So it's really variable depending on who you're talking to. But I think as we build the regular schedule for both Toronto and Vancouver, this will start to become on the radar of many of the brands, and they'll just have it in their books. Like, yeah, this is where we go for Canada. And this is, they plan for those shows.
Now, we come at this, all of us, as watch enthusiasts, and it's called the Toronto Timepiece Show. But actually, it's about a lot more than just timepieces. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about some of the other exhibitors that we can expect to see there, and maybe even some of the special guests?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to do that. So I'll talk about the extra exhibitors. Part of the brand mix that I originally designed, the goal was very similar to like what you would see with some of the wind-up shows in the US. About 70 to 75% smaller independent brands, maybe 25%, more larger recognizable brands like Christopher Ward or Oris. And I wanted to have a smattering of non-timepiece brands just to help break up the mix a little bit. So we actually have two of those this year. So we have this great group from Mississauga, and his name is Jason as well. He's from a shop called the Optical Tailor. Small business guy, just opened up his shop about a year ago, but he has these really incredibly high-end sunglasses and glasses and really special things. So he's been kind enough to support the show, and he's coming out with one of their brand reps. So they're going to be right in the main foyer area. I certainly encourage you to stop by. The glasses are absolutely gorgeous. I just know I'm going to wind up buying a pair of glasses from him because I've seen it so much on Instagram, and they're absolutely stunning. And we have another individual, Wesley Smith from Standard H, and some of you may recognize that name. He's basically like a apparel and streetwear. A lot of the folks, like the folks at the Grey NATO, are some of his ambassadors. He's coming up to support the show. Some really high quality clothing pieces there, so he'll be there. So again, a little bit of a mix within the, I love timepieces. But when you go through these shows, if you've never done it before, sometimes it gets overwhelming after a while when you have 50 or 60 tables and it's like incredible timepieces after incredible timepieces. And it's a good mental break to kind of engage with another non-timepiece brand, at least for a little while. So that was always by design. So we're very excited about that. In terms of the special guests, we have many people coming out. I know, Brent, you're kindly supporting the show and being a moderator for many of our talks. We've got an individual by the name of Alexander Beauregard. He's actually an ultrology maker out of Montreal. A lot of people in the watch community don't necessarily know him because the level that he operates at with his timepieces, and they're masterful, but he's known on the world stage. So I really wanted him to come out and just share his experience and his journey of how he got into that market space. So he's going to be speaking about that. We have a number of horology-based artists who are coming out, and they're going to speak about their creative process. We've got a number of brands talking, including Marathon and Lock & King and Whitby Watch Company. They're going to be speaking about their Canadian journey. We've got a Grey NATO live podcast recording as well at the end of the day. I think that's going to be incredibly popular. So they're actually going to set up their equipment right on the stage in our theater room, which is about 110 seats. And they're going to do a live recording. And I believe they're going to use the Q&A session mostly during the course of the show recording. So it should be a lot of fun. We've got some others as well, but, many people coming. And there's also non-speakers who are coming who are special guests. And they're flying in to, just attend the show, to be there. We've got a lot of great watchmakers. We've got other brands coming from different parts of the world. And it's going to be an absolutely incredible weekend. So, for those of you who come, I would encourage all of you to arrive early before the doors open. There are people that are planning on arriving very early. They want to be one of the first people in through the doors on Saturday and Sunday. So, we're going to do our best to get everybody through the show. But, a ticket does not guarantee entry into the show. If the hotel's at capacity and we can't bring anybody else in, or people are not leaving, then there's a little bit of a risk that you may not gain entry to the show if you show up late. So I do encourage everyone to show up as soon as possible or early as possible.
Well, I know that we are all very busy individuals this week, probably no one quite as busy as you, Jason, so we won't keep you too much longer. I have just one final question to kind of wrap things up today, and that is, when the curtain falls on the 29th, what's the first thing you're going to do afterward?
Probably sleep. Yeah. I've actually got a vacation booked, not right away, but soon after, about 3 days afterwards. And I'm going to England, and I don't get too much time to do it, but I'll go there usually about once a year, and I go on a metal detecting trip. So I actually look for treasure like Roman coins and medieval artifacts and things like that. So this first half of October, I'll be in England for about 10 days, digging in farmers' fields, hoping to find something amazing. So that will be my kind of decompression after the show. I'm already full steam into the Vancouver show, though. And even before stepping in for the podcast today, I was, having a call with someone, and it doesn't stop. It just kind of keeps going. There's just periods of more busy or less busy. So, I think when the curtain falls, I just want to make sure that everybody's had a great time, and then it's on to Vancouver and, of course, planning for the next Toronto show. I usually operate on a time frame about 12 to 15 months ahead. So I'm already thinking about, what we're going to do for next year, as well as just making sure all the loose ends are tied up here for the show, which is happening in a couple of weeks.
Well, I can't tell you how pleased we were that you cut some time out for us here this morning. It's been a fantastic talk. We can't wait to go there. Thank you so much, Jason.
My pleasure. And it's always such a pleasure to engage with all of you. I'm so happy that all of you are going to be at the show. And I just want to thank you and the rest of the watch community for your support of this show. Without you, it could not have been possible. And I'm really, really happy to be bringing this to everybody. I want it to be a really memorable weekend and something that people can look forward to each and every year. So thank you, all of you, for your support. And thank you to the community, because certainly this show wouldn't happen without you. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason. Really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Time to Calibrate is available anywhere you can listen to fine podcasts, so please do subscribe, like, and hit all those bells and whistles. It does make a difference. Until next time, thanks for listening.